This is Terry Simpson. She is one of the students highlighted in the article. Terry Simpson remembers the first moment she told someone she was pregnant. She was 13 in a summer school program, and she told a friend at the top of the slide. So here's the question. If Terry was in your classroom and you're a veteran CPS teacher, would she come to you? Would you know what to say? If you're a new teacher, and I know we probably even have some of you who not only are new teachers with CPS, but you're a brand new teacher, would you know what to say? Those are the things we're going to talk about as we head into this afternoon. Another student featured in the article, part of our reality, this is Malik. He feels a constant tension between wanting to venture into his community and the fear that he'll be jumped or shot if he strays too far. This spring, Jashawn Martin and Tyann Adkins, both who were also 14, were shot to death within 8 days of each other, one in Avondale and the other in nearby Walnut Hills. Malik knew them both. They were friends. So when we start to talk this afternoon about how are we going to incorporate the social and emotional learning in real ways into our bell schedules, and then we're going to say the word advisory, before you roll your eyes and maybe bring some of your past history with advisory, I want you to think about Malik, because where would the time be in the school day if he were thinking about his two friends that were shot, where he could find some quiet time to go to that adult he's connected to and talk to them? Because at the end of it, that's really what we're talking about in this second piece this afternoon. Where are we going to build those times into our schedules as junior high teachers to address the reality of turning 14 in Cincinnati, of being that junior high student in front of you? One last student I want to talk about, because I spent a lot of time at Taft this year. Malik Green, freshman, Taft High School, basketball team. He was one of 3 teenagers who robbed a market in the middle of the day. They held the owner of the market as well as one of the customers. It was a pellet gun, but still, the 2 men were begging for their lives. They stole their wallets, took the credit cards, and went shopping at the local mall. No one would have guessed that this young man, and I know my teachers from Taft, and you are the junior high teachers, but no one would have thought that this young man would be involved in that. No one. They're all shaking their heads. So the question is, why? You know, we've been talking about the prefrontal cortex, and we were laughing a lot this morning about the prefrontal cortex, or lack thereof, because we were talking about boys and girls, you know, boys licking girls and all of that. But this is a more serious side of that. And just because these are junior high kids, this is also a choice they can make to rob a market in the middle of the day. And when asked why, he said he felt that one reason teenagers commit these kinds of crimes is that they fear being viewed as a punk. And what he meant by that was different than what you or I would mean by being a punk. What he meant by that was you'd get looked at as a lesser person, or like you're afraid. So when we were talking about those decisions this morning, you know, it can be a lot more serious, those lapses of judgment. So where are we as junior high educators, all of us, going to build into our day time to teach kids, okay, what can you do to make a better choice? What are you going to do when you're standing there and your 2 friends have the pellet gun and they say, hey, I know what would be fun? What do you do? Because they don't know. And no, we are not all guidance counselors, nor can we be. We cannot somehow magically be their parents. But one thing that I truly believe, and I have to go back to teaching because I'm not ready to let this go yet, I do believe I can make a difference for Malik. And I know that you can do, because I so enjoyed my time as a coach watching people like Ken DeFew connect at Aiken with Willie, students in her class, that everybody else would say, I don't know how you can stand him. And if I asked any of you in this room, you could tell me about a student. I have no doubt that you could. And so as we move forward this afternoon, this is the more serious side of the social and emotional learning pieces that I want us all to keep in mind. When this whole high school initiative was getting started, there was a lot of talk about how do we support teachers, because the reality is you are the hero. And just, I want to put my face on Wonder Woman because I know I look like that, right? You are going to be the hero of this story. It starts and ends with you. This initiative goes nowhere if you don't want to be the superhero. It's true. I mean, it's kind of corny, but it's so true. And we are going to be the ones who make the difference. And it's really hard, though, when you're the person on the front line and you got 30. I love it when they say class size is 28 because it's not. You've got 35. Oh, you know what? I'll just even say 30. And they're all sitting in front of you. And now they're going to be playing with their technology. Just remember that you're Superman or you're Wonder Woman. But the good news is the district really has, in this initiative, realized that reality. And they're going to do everything they can to give you your Superman cape and your Wonder Woman whip. And I love it that Wonder Woman gets like the lasso, because you're going to be supported. And the reason that I know that's true is that I've watched all the preparation on the back end, and they went out to the community. And this is what the community is telling us that they want Cincinnati Public School graduates to be. They want self-aware. Okay, now everybody nod their head. Everyone remember the graphic this morning, because that was the social emotional learning. Self-awareness was number one. They also want students who are capable, and think about that word for a second. Capable of what exactly? Well, capable of thinking on their feet, capable of filling out a job application, capable of looking, okay, on and on and on. But there's a lot underneath that, right? There's the literacy skills, there's the math skills. That's us. Giving that to them. Collaborative. In today's work environment, if you can't collaborate, you will not have a job for very long. Because those days when you can disappear into a cubicle and never have to interact with anyone else unless you're going to be an actuary, that doesn't exist anymore. And it doesn't exist for us, by the way, right? Because those days where we could go in our classroom and shut our door and say, don't bother me, can't do that anymore. So collaboration, true for us, true for the students. Skillful and engaged. And again, if you remember that wheel, that engagement piece. So how do we do all of this? Because that's a pretty tall order. Well, it's all starting with junior high. Part of rethinking curriculum and rethinking how to approach students and give them what they need. You are so lucky because they're starting with 7th and 8th grade. I mean, we get to be the pioneers, you 7th and 8th grade teachers. All right, this is the Career Readiness Roadmap, which you'll be seeing more of. The district is building in what does that roadway look like for a student to end up, and they've put career ready because that could mean anything, right? Career ready could mean I've completed college, or career ready could mean I'm graduating from Woodward Technical and I'm taking a job in a construction company. It could mean a lot of different things for our students. So at the left-hand side is where I'm facing it, 7th and 8th grade. Here are some of the things that are going to pave the way, because I love horrible metaphors. Pave the way. We're going to have advisory, which you're going to learn a lot about here in just a little bit. We've already talked about SEL, which is the social and emotional learning. And then digital lessons. Remember, you got your technology, and your students will be getting their technology in August, that 1-to-1 ratio. Now, I don't know about you. I do not know how to tweet. I still call it Spacebook because I get MySpace and Facebook confused, so I say Spacebook. And I know that a lot of you have had to go to the help desk a lot. So what I want to make sure you realize is that your students, a lot of them are in the same boat, right? Think about all of the students who are going to come to you that don't know where the shift key is on the keyboard because all they do is this. They don't know where the shift key is on the QWERTY keyboard. Now, do they learn it faster than us? Yeah. But we're going to give you tools in that toolbox with some digital lessons for your students as well, so that there's not extra work on you to think about that. That starts this roadway so that Malik, because both those young men I highlighted happen to both be named Malik, and Terry, those 3 students from that Turning 14 in Cincinnati, they're going to go down this road, and all of them are going to be as happy as that young woman on the right. And that's our goal. So never lose sight of that today while we're talking about all of these things. Okay. The foundation for what we're going to talk about this afternoon and building in some of this social emotional learning and advisory time is based on the high schools that work. And I know many of you in the room are familiar with that organization and the work they do. It's based on personalized learning. 2 things that are going to help us personalize that learning for each and every student are Playbook and Naviance. And the reason I've put August on there is you're going to get a lot more information. I know a lot of you have heard the word student portal being talked about today. The students are going to have a portal, and they're going to log in. Where is the student portal? Well, you can't look at it yet, but it is coming. And I have seen a lot of the work around it, and it truly is going to be a place where your students can log in, and you can log in, and they can get one-to-one help. Actually, one of the goals of this program would even be there's a remediation part. So if a student, it links in with Dashboard. If they need help with mathematics lessons, we could link that to things like Alex. On the reading side, same kind of thing. What do you need to work on? There could be individualized tutorials. I mean, that level is really where the district plans to go. Now, why that should make you happy as a teacher is my personalized learning, my differentiated instruction, got easier for me. Because those are the tools that the district is going to be able to provide for you to differentiate and personalize instruction through the one-to-one technology. Because I know the one-to-one technology is cool, like the poll we did, because I really like that. But there's a very practical application here because our numbers are going to keep going up and up, right, with students. Okay. Another thing with the high schools that work is high expectations for each content area. We started this work last fall, looking at Common Core, rigor, what does that mean? In terms of curriculum, you will continue to hear more about this in August, and we will all continue to be working on our expectations in our content areas. Teacher collaboration. So yesterday, that was kind of the focus. How are we all as a team going to talk? And I think it was Julia made the point that if we're all doing research on the same day, when are we all going to talk so we know that? Because one of the key pieces of this is that we all have time as teachers to have that conversation. So for the administrators in the room, what that would mean is your entire 7th grade team can't have plan at 6 different times. There has to be a time when we all have to sit down and say, how are we going to make this successful? So we can have those conversations. I really liked the case study with the skiers because half the time I feel like I've lost my poles, my tent, my skis, and I'm not real sure where my coat is. So if you have team members that can help you, that can make all the difference. Technology integration. It will be students and teachers, again in August, because I was kind of listening a little bit this morning, and I know some of you are a little frustrated still with the tablet, and I'm not quite sure I know what I'm doing. Okay, plenty of training still coming your way. Actually, tomorrow, the technology piece is one of the breakout sessions you can choose. So the technology piece, we're not done when you walk out of here tomorrow. There's still plenty of support coming your way with that. And I already talked about the digital lessons. Those things are going to continue to be offered to you. Advisory. This is where we're going this afternoon. Now, how many of you have experience with something called advisory in your school? Okay, can you all take a deep breath for me? And let it out. And open your mind. Because I promise you that where we're going with advisory is very different than what you've seen. I promise that's true. All right? Okay. So Joan is going to come back up and talk to us. I'm sorry? Yeah. And talk to us a little bit about the research around advisory so that we can start talking about what we're going to make this look like for our students.
Okay, I know you're saying, oh no, more research, more research. Well, we just want to be sure that you understand that somebody besides us is saying, this is what works. Because we know that it works. We've seen it work in many of our schools, and many of us have done some of it. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. But again, for about 30 years, we've been looking at advisory, and in particular in middle school and high school, and what that looks like. We know that there are improved relationships between students and teachers. We know that kids feel more trusting, and they feel that they belong. There's a strong atmosphere of being equal in those classrooms, and we certainly see reduced risk behaviors. Kids who get that feeling of belonging at school and feeling of connection will do less experimentation with drugs, less experimentation with sexual behavior at an early age. We see an increase in daily attendance, and we absolutely see an increase in academic achievement. So why should we be doing advisory? Well, research tells us we should. If we look at best practices around the country and around Cincinnati Public, we know it's what we need to be doing. It's part of our high school reform effort. If we look at what's happening globally in our country, in our city, in our country, around the world, our kids are not as competitive as they used to be. We know that. We know that businesses are telling us they're not bringing us the skills we need them to have when they get here. But beyond that, the world is changing so rapidly. And while the United States has for many, many years led the world in production, we are losing our global edge. There are other countries who are rapidly biting at our heels, who are going to be first. And believe me, life will be different for all of us if we lose that global edge. And we aren't going to be able to maintain it unless we produce young people who can be productive in the world. And we also do it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for our kids, to make sure that they have the very best that's possible. So some of the things that we've learned from best practices is that kids have to have a personal learning plan. I've talked and worked with many of you with Naviance for the last 2 years, and Naviance is at the core. Naviance is the software tool that we are using for kids to build their personal learning plan. But it is only a tool. It's the whole process of how they go about building their plan that is going to make this work. And the process is them learning who they are, where they're going, and how they get there. And there are pieces that they have to do each year along the way, and they collect and keep in their portfolio. We know that there has to be an adult advocate for every student. Now, I always look at this sort of like a pyramid of interventions. Many of our children will come to us, and they have an adult advocate in their life before they get to us. Some of them do not. We have to find those kids, reach out to those kids who do not have an adult advocate, and make sure that we try to hook them up with somebody who can be their caring adult. They They may not have somebody they can go home to and talk about what they did in school today. They may not have somebody that can have a meaningful discussion with them about what does it mean to be career or college ready. They may not have anybody they can talk to about a hard decision they're having to make. Again, we are not asking you to be counselors, but we are asking that you be mindful of some of the many issues that your students bring into your classrooms. Self-awareness, interpersonal skills, decision-making, personal safety skills, we know these are things that we have to teach somewhere along the way. There's not time to do that in your classrooms. We have to make time. We have to find a time that is available for our kids. We know that best practices, if we look at all the research and we look at what's worked around the country, a minimum of 90 minutes a week is what works best. We know that all teachers serving as advisors works best. All hands on deck. We know that for whatever reason, advisory works better for kids. The statistics, the outcome of the research looks better if it happens in the morning. It starts their day. They get a better start to the day. It boils down to that. Small class size is recommended, 8 to 14 kids in an advisory class. Each advisory needs its own space, its own place. It can't be an add-on. It can't be 10 or 15 minutes on the end of a class. It has to be a time when kids get up, they change classes, and they actually go to a spot where they have advisory. Many of you know what happens when it's an add-on. Anybody want to comment on that? Back here, Miss Kenny.
Last on Friday at 3 o'clock, 15 minutes before the day is over, and you get ready to go for the weekend, and then it hits us at lunchtime. Oh yeah, we're supposed to be doing advisory.
Correct. It has no meaning at that point. If it's an add-on, if it's not important enough to make it something individual and unique, it doesn't have meaning. And we know that there have to be student-centered activities at the heart of that. Again, tomorrow, one of the workshops will be building community in the classroom. And a lot of that, I'll be doing that, and a lot of that is just how do you have fun with kids and build community at the same time. Some silly games and that sort of thing. And, you know, that is part of how you build community. You have to have that kind of relationship with kids. And it's not always easy to develop a personal relationship. So we'll talk about what's personal versus what's private, what you share, what you don't share, how you do that. Okay? Now we also know that around the district, lots and lots of these pieces are taking place. And we're going to have some folks talk to you about what they're doing in their schools. But before we do that, we have a special treat. We want to acknowledge the successes and acknowledge that some of you may not be feeling so great about your test scores. So we have a sweet surprise for you this afternoon that's coming around to make you feel very happy, we hope. Again, kudos to Kelly and the planning team. Miss Kenny, show them your rubber chicken, please. Okay, everybody look at Miss Kenny's rubber chicken. I have to tell you, these rubber chickens have made this 3 months of hard work completely wonderful for me just to get a rubber chicken. Mr. Gibson, you have one too. All right, here you go. We'll be throwing around some rubber chickens today. faces, we'll put a happy face on you.
Everybody get one?
Okay, while we are enjoying these great treats, Mr. Gibson is going to talk just a minute about some of the great things that have happened at Hughes in regard to advisory. Mr. Gibson?
Well, first let me start by saying I'm probably the worst advisory teacher. You know? So everybody put yourself at rest if anybody can do it. It kind of goes back when I started teaching. I grew up in Cincinnati Public, was child of poverty. When I first started teaching, this lady I taught with always was teaching kids about hope, and it drove me nuts. My idea of teaching our kids about hope was show them the clip from Shawshank Redemption. And really there's no room for this. You know, the reality is you have to be better than the average person and this, and this. And so after much argument with this person, I kind of learned this SEL teaching type stuff where you teach kids more self-awareness about themselves and get them to a place where they can have hope. It wasn't about teaching them the reality more so than teaching them how to deal with the reality. So I ended up marrying that lady, and so it was all good. But some of the things we do at Hughes that I think are really positive is we have a bell set aside for advisory, and I think we all start off the year really gung-ho about advisory. We have some great activities, and by the end of first quarter, we've all ran out of activities. And so we sometimes fall back and treat it as a study bell. So what I love about what the district's doing is they're going to help us with resources. Because you do run out of those resources as an individual teacher standing alone, teaching SEL and advisory and academic advising. And I love the fact that we try to teach advising not just as academic, but also as SEL. There's a very, very important part of that, and we've learned along the way some things to do and not do. We've learned not to get, what's the difference between personal and private, and what's the difference between constructive teaching versus teaching from your soapbox. And so there's a lot of tracks with advisory, especially SEL. And seeing and having people that are kind of experienced and gone through that already, it's going to help out a lot as the district moves forward. They have an amazing group of people that are working on these lessons for us. And one of the other things that we do that's very unique at Hughes is we have a partnership with UC. And last year, although the logistics was not perfect, it was a great idea. And I'm working with some people this summer to make the logistics better. But we have about 80 students from UC that come over during our advisory time. And we actually take our advisory numbers from about 15 to 18 advisees per teacher down to almost 5 per teacher, and then individually one-on-one with a UC student. Last year, the UC students came in very green. They're juniors and seniors. Half of them are special ed majors, and the other half are psych majors. And they come in very green, ready to talk to our kids. Very few of them have an urban background. And so by week 3, they're like, what are we doing here? And so we are working very closely with the people you see to kind of curb that interaction and possibly prepare their students a little better. Also, the logistics were a nightmare. We kind of said, oh, okay, all these UC people are going to come. And the teachers at first were like, oh, cool, my advisory's down to 5 people. But then we had UC kids, our students with UC students, all over the building doing various things, and there was no guidance. And so we learned from that last year. And this year, as we move forward, we hope that that relationship gets stronger and it becomes more effective. So don't be afraid with the advising piece to go out into your community and get a partnership to help you with that. Don't be afraid to share the SEL part. I will honestly say, in the first probably my 5 to 8 years of teaching, I love science and I love teaching. And I always thought kids were just naturally gravitated towards me, but I realized that in those first 8 or 9 years, I was always so focused on building relationships with my students first that other things I thought came a lot easier. But I still had this edge to me, like, the Shawshank thing, like, there's no room for hope, you just gotta do your thing. So the SEL piece has actually helped me with my relationship with students in a way that I probably would never have seen had I not been brought to Hughes 3 years ago and kind of thrown into this advising thing, and I'm like, I'm not gonna teach that touchy-feely crap, I ain't no room for that. But I didn't lose my discipline edge. I'm still the jerk at the beginning of the year that the kids don't like, so that's all good. Because I think a lot of fear is, in advising, if we come down to that level with students, then we would lose some of our edge on our discipline. And that's just not the case. Believe it or not, it actually builds it up, because the kids actually have more internal respect for you than this external piece. And then the last thing I would just like to say, in 3 years, you won't see the effects immediately. You may not see them until they leave you and they're 2 grades up. But the only way I can compare it is in boxing. When you punch a guy in the face, it seems to have more instant gratification and effect physically. But it's the rib shots that down the rounds end up paying dividends. And basically, look at advising like that. You're taking those rib shots. They're not going to appear immediately as something, strong and amazing. But down the road, especially towards the end of your year, and especially when they move on to the next grade, some of the things that you put in place, teachers next year will really notice. They'll say, man, these kids are like da 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 da. So it really has power to it, and you just got to jump in with both feet, even if you're as uncomfortable as I am.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. I have to say that I have known Mr. Gibson since he was in junior high, and he was one of those kids that had the big head. He has grown into his head, and it's wonderful. There's another person who's going to talk to us about what advisory has looked like at her school. Miss Tamara Grant from Clark. Because it may look a little different at her school than it does at Randy's.
I'm not great with microphones, but I'll do my best. I will try not to yell into the microphone. That's what I do sometimes. At Clark, we have, in the middle school level, what we call a community time, and in the high school level, we do call it advisory, but it does happen through grades 7 to 12. I want to talk about what my teaching partner, Michael, does with me, and we have about 30 minutes a day, and we stick actually to a routine with that. So on Mondays, during our 30 minutes, we have a meeting time where every kid gets out their planner, we make announcements, go to the group. We do what's called a greeting, so it might be what's your favorite movie, or do you like chocolate or vanilla ice cream, whatever. And they come up with them, so the sky is the limit, you can imagine. On Tuesdays, we have kind of a fun time, we call it Teach Me Tuesday. And we set up a scenario in which every student in the class is an expert. And they give a 30-minute lesson on whatever. So we had lessons from shark anatomy, duct tape wallet, origami, making pom-pom animals, like with your yarn and fingers, how to tie a bow tie happen. So every Tuesday, and they're partnered, and so since we have a multi-age classroom, 7th and 8th graders, we partner a 7th grader with an 8th grader to do that work so that they also kind of set up a mentor relationship there and building those relationships, a one-to-one with the older student and the younger student. And they teach those lessons together. So they also work to find something that they're interested in together, they're mutually interested in to teach. So that's kind of a cool thing too. On Wednesdays, we speak to their inner child, and we turn off all the lights and light a candle, and I read a novel. And I do the voices and everything. And they love it. I mean, there's something about that. Everybody kind of loves to be read to, at least I still do. And that's why books on paper are popular, right? And I pick a novel That's usually a little bit below their interest level, so it's still kind of little kitty, but not too little kitty, so I'm not reading a picture book, it's still a chapter book. And then Thursdays, we kind of set up a help time where they can work together or with us. And then Friday, we do what's called a group initiative. And a lot of people confuse group initiatives and games. Group initiatives, the biggest difference is that nobody's ever out. Usually people are working together to solve some kind of puzzle or some kind of problem that they've been given. And it's not, how would you guys explain it? Right?
There's not a winner.
There's not a winner, working together, we're collaborative. And at the end of every group initiative, we process what happened and we answer these 3 questions, which actually Kelly, I don't know if everybody has the same finger fidgets, but Kelly, because she's a Montessori mom, she included our processing questions in your finger fidget. So there are these,
That's great.
so at your tables there are these Legos, and one of them says what, and that's where we process what we actually did, what went well, what didn't go well. Then we talk about so what, that's the yellow Lego. And why was that important? Why was it important that we learn to work together on this trouble or whatever? And then the now what is how are we going to apply that learning to our classroom setting, to the things that we face academically? If I'm struggling with my math work, how am I going to apply what I learned in this group initiative to those troubles I'm having in math? Is it I'm learning how to ask for help more, I'm learning to communicate with my peers, to ask questions, building that relationship even so I just feel safe to ask those questions. Those are all things that are happening in that group initiative setting on Fridays. So that's kind of our routine. I pulled up my email so I could remember what Joan asked me to talk about. Right, I swiped the right way.
What does it mean to you?
Yeah, that was the last thing.
Yes.
I think what's great about being in a community and doing these activities with kids is there's more of that human piece. I feel like I can approach problems with kids. It's not a us and them or a me and you. It's a we're in it together. That this is how we're going to take on reading Shakespeare. We're in it together. I'm gonna be able to work with you in a way that you can feel successful because I've been able to see you be successful in not just your chair working on a worksheet. I know how you can be successful. I can help you figure out the harder pieces. So it's easier for me to understand kids and where they're coming from and their personalities, and how I can apply that to taking on those things that are harder curricularly.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. It is wonderful for me to go into the classrooms and see what many of you as classroom teachers are doing every day. And I tell people there are remarkable things happening in every building every day in Cincinnati Public. We have a comment in the back. Mr. Jost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been interesting talking about advisory just in the last couple weeks as we were getting ready for this. And in the last year and a half, as you may or may not know, Gamble was involved. We were a school improvement in that grant. And so we were up at the state, and I would talk about part of what we would do and how we build advisory into what we did. And time again, the principal said, well, you're wasting this time. You know, you could be, and they'd fill in, drilling math or drilling reading or drilling. And I said, no, we're not wasting this time at all. we're really encouraged by how the research has come in on our side and the enthusiastic approach taken by the district. And I just want to advocate for it and tell you this is how we became successful, because we sacrificed intentionally time to do this stuff that research now says, and we knew all along, is really important. It's how you develop a middle school student. We broke our time down to address 3 sets of needs for our students. And we just shut down academic instruction when we do this. And our model is very similar to what Clark described in the middle school. It is 1 bell a day, every day. So we're meeting sets of needs. First of all, we're taking care of business, calendar updates, planner, announcements. Those could be our announcements, school announcements, student announcements. Taking time intentionally and teaching the skill of acknowledging each other, teaching students how to not only give an acknowledgement, but how to accept an acknowledgement. Overtly teaching those kinds of skills and doing some self-reflection. Second of all, we address student academic needs in that time, talk about goal setting, grade, GPA review, progress review with their individual plans, and just organizational skills. How do you manage your agenda? What do you do with your binder? Where do you keep your stuff? Taking the time to stop and take a breath and walk them through that. We know they need that skill at the end of every class. We know they need it every week, and we take the time to do that. And third, and most importantly, is social emotional learning. And it's easy for us in our language to become dismissive of it and call them sort of silly games. But the work that we do with students to solve a problem collectively, figure out how to do something, and to stop and to ask those 3 questions, the what, so what, now what, that's really powerful for a group of students, because we forget that when they go through one of these experiences or one of these games, that's their first time sometimes processing that. And when we stop and intentionally walk them through that again, that's their second time going through that. And so we are giving them experiences by stopping and talking about the experience they just had. And that's how we train those pathways in the brain, right? They become more efficient at making good decisions. And occasionally, you'll catch them in the cafeteria having the what, so what, now what conversation. It's very rewarding. But it's like a soap bubble, though. If you call attention to it, it bursts and goes away. So you just got to stand back and watch it. So we take time doing games and puzzles, and we do something. And I'm not sure if Tamara mentioned this, but we will sometimes give them a 30-minute period of solo time where we stipulate you can't do schoolwork right now. You've got to go to the shelf, you've got to read something for pleasure, you've got to solve a puzzle or take on some other challenge. You can't do schoolwork right now. And I'm telling you, I can't even explain exactly why it works. They appreciate the time, they appreciate the space away, and then they come back re-energized and ready to go. This is a place where also we've done our positive school culture lessons, so when we teach them how things need to work in certain parts of the building, we capture that time to overtly teach them so they don't feel like foreigners when they walk into the cafeteria. And we also do community meetings, solving problems, addressing issues, and we have a pretty set routine, and those are almost entirely in our school student-led. They understand the agenda, we teach them the agenda, but then the students run through it. And you guys know we all have some leaders in our classrooms who are quicker and harsher than some of us in terms of correcting each other's behavior and calling each other to doing the business of the class. But I strongly advocate it, and I'm glad we're here talking about seriously doing this because it's really important.
Thank you. That is absolutely a wonderful, wonderful testament to what we're talking about. And I know that many, many more of you are doing things like this in your individual classrooms or in your buildings. We just want to appreciate you for what you do, and we want to build you up to meet the challenge that we're all going to be meeting. Ray is going to take us out of here to our work session after we have a few more words.
Think back to yesterday morning with Dr. Davidson and that case study and those 6 words that I wrote down. I want to repeat them again. Recreate, re-image, high school initiative, exercise. Consider, reflect, change, and then that placemat language that we're asked to do as teachers. We ask our students to do this. Reflect on your understanding and consider new possibilities. And this is tough for teachers like me. Next year is my 27th year in the district, and I've been through mentor, homeroom, enrichments, advisory, and I have different and mixed feelings and opinions about the meanings of those words. So the words from Dr. Davidson and the case study yesterday about recreating, re-imaging, reflecting, reconsidering, I think those are more than just words. They carry meaning that's real. I was sharing with Mrs. Mitchell that the work we've been doing on all of this stuff, especially this brain research stuff, that I think is fascinating, it's had an impact on me as a parent. You know, with my son and all that family business, the skeletons in the closet. But then, you know, when my daughter bursts into the living room the way that only a 14-year-old girl can burst into a room and flings herself on the couch and says, "Daddy, my life!" And next thing I know, she's got her head on the floor and her feet are up on the couch and they're black because she's been running around outside barefoot, and she's kicking her feet saying, "I don't understand," and then she does a cartwheel and runs out of the house. And my wife and I are just sitting there, okay, she's 14, she's strange, but she's my daughter, and I love her. And the students in front of you, you have those same kinds of affections for. We are actually asking, and I'm included in this, I get to do this at Euler next year. Take this idea of advisory, mentor, enrichment, whatever, and really recreate, re-image, refocus, rethink what that means. But we have a paradox. What a novel I've read by a guy named Joseph Heller is Catch-22. He kind of created that phrase, Catch-22. And very briefly, the pilots who are flying these missions in World War II, they're getting killed at an alarming rate. And they don't want to fly these missions anymore. So they come up with a plan. We're not going to fly these missions. You know how we're going to get out of it? We're going to say that we're crazy. We're going to say we're mentally unstable, which makes us unfit for duty. So they go to their commander with this plan, and the commander says, well, in order to prove you're mentally unstable, you have to fly the missions. They're in a catch-22. In order to show that I can't fly the missions, I have to fly the missions. So, we have a paradox. On the one hand, we get the importance of social emotional learning, and it didn't used to be called that, and relationship building, and all of that kind of stuff. We as teachers and parents, we get that. That's part of why we're in this profession. But then the other side is standardized testing. And people in this room are already figuring out how can I take time from advisory to get more instructional time? How can I lessen advisory so I get to teach more? And I think Jack spoke to the importance of what happens in advisory to impact academics. And this is a for real catch-22. There were a couple people in the room who, as I worked as a Common Core coach last year, really kind of kept me grounded in that reality. One of them from Data, Chandra Gardner, and I would talk with her in her room. I was in her room all the time last year. She's a great teacher, she's passionate, she loves her kids, and she'll fight for them. And so sometimes the form of her fighting for her students was fighting me, not literally. But Chandra was always pushing back and always challenging and always bringing up those kinds of elephants in the room and those paradoxes. And so we can't be afraid to talk about that. When you go to your work groups this afternoon, hammer that stuff out. Go ahead and get that stuff out of the way. Oh, I don't want to waste time on non-instructional stuff because I got my test scores back and I was hoping to get a 75. I got a 58. Now I'm in trouble because my value added is taxed. And now my principal is mad at me and wants to know what else am I going to do to bring test scores up. Oh, but we have the part this year, which is 6 times as hard as the harder test this year. So what are we going to do about all that? And And if you read the paper this morning, you saw there was an editorial response to that Turning 14 series in the newspaper the last couple weeks, and the lady who was right, I can't remember the organization she represented, but it caught my eye, so I read it. She said, you know, Inquirer, we don't need more sob stories, we need real solutions. What if the people in this room servicing the 5,300 7th and 8th grade students in our district are part of that real solution that lady's talking about? Because I know I'm going to be one of them, and I know that my team at Euler is going to be one team that's going to be part of that solution when she says, we don't need more sob stories, we need real solutions. Well, guess what? All 5'7" of me right now, you're looking at one of the solutions. And my team back there, you're looking at one of the teams that's going to be the solutions, because we believe in our students, and we believe that we have to do everything. Academic, social, emotional learning. Yeah, sometimes playing the counselor. But raise your hand if you've never counseled a student. Go ahead right now, raise your hand if you have never counseled a student. We do that as part of our job. So I am excited. In fact, I was so excited that I said I want to go back in the classroom and be a part of this high school initiative. So I'm teaching 7th grade at Euler next year. I'm going to have a class of boys. I'm going to have a class of girls. I'm going to have an advisory group. And I'm going to be part of the solution that the lady who wrote the article in the paper this morning bemoans that we lack. But like Chandra, sometimes I'm skeptical. And I want to know, what's the support? How are you going to support me, Deputy Superintendent Mitchell? How are you going to support me, Assistant Superintendent Lofton? Are you really going to do that? And I actually challenged Dr. Lofton, and I said to him, I asked him, would you be willing to come into my school once a month and be a part of my mentor group and show your support that way? And he said, absolutely. So I believe he's going to be around this afternoon circulating to the different work groups, because I want to know how for real is this. Because I'm going to be in the classroom, on the front line, teaching kids in a neighborhood where a guy got gunned down last week and his blood is still on the sidewalk. So, as we get ready to segue into our work time, I want you to really seriously consider in your teams this afternoon re-imaging what your thoughts are on that word advisory, and re-imaging the purpose of it, and talking about and thinking about how does it connect to increased academic achievement because of our catch-22 paradox. Will we spend time on that stuff when we have standardized test scores and the public and a looming tax levy breathing down our necks, and the state Board of Education and SLOs and value added, all that stuff. So, I believe Ms. Indalacio is going to segue us into a work time. And as she's coming up, I'm going to issue a final challenge to you, to our 5,300 middle school students that we service at CPS. I'm going to be servicing some of that starting in August. Be a part of the solution.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Excellent job, Ray. So the challenge has been laid that you guys are going to be part of the solution, and I know that you are. And we really appreciate the energy and enthusiasm that you kind of gotten behind all of this work today and yesterday. And we do want you to know that we're here to support that work. That this is not just lip service. We will be out in the field, really helping and working with you along the way.